Welcome to the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our special guest today is Anne Gannon. Anne is the principal at the Largo Group. The Largo Group offers innovative accounting and bookkeeping solutions to businesses and individuals. Anna realized her true passion was finance in the midst of playing golf at a professional level. Her time on the pro circuit had a big impact on her approach to business, and she strives to give back to the golf and hospitality industries by building her accounting firm as a corporation instead of a service. If the Largo Group wins, the team wins. And is also the author of 2 books, Never Again, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Creating a Resilient Business During COVID-19 Pandemic Recovery, and her most recent one, Shotmaker, An Owner's Guide to Creating a Winning Business. All right. And I'm so excited about this interview. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
And I'm curious about something. I understand about people in business, accountants, clients playing golf, but story has it that you were supposed to go big in the golf world, right? You were supposed to turn pro. And how did you end up pivoting into accounting?
Yeah, so I played, my college career, always had the goal of, amateur ranking. So in golf, that's, sort of how you measure yourself as points throughout the year in different tournaments. So I'd always really built my schedule around, where to get the points and everything for the amateur ranking. And so by my senior year, I was ranked 11th in the country, and very excited to be there, and really then started to put my sights on turning professional. And a lot of my peers, were going pro, and the question of when. And so, went through the whole process, card and all of that. And then, my first year of playing professionally, I realized very quickly that, I was sort of driving around the country listening to CNBC, and kind of always had this, eye on like Business World, or like, what else can I be reading? Because the thing people don't realize in professional golf is there's so much downtime, that you have a full week at a site. So you might be in Vermont for, 7 days, and you have, 4 days for a tournament, but you're only playing like 4 hours every day. So there's a ton of time to just be thinking.
Wow.
And, most of my peer groups out there kind of like figuring out their swing or launch angle and all this stuff. And to me, I just really wasn't there. And where in the amateur world, it didn't matter because we were all in school and we were all doing other things. But in the professional world, that really had to be your passion. And I realized quickly that it just wasn't for me. And so I felt like it was a much of an aha moment to just say, if I know this now, like I could continue and that would be fine. And I'd always been really known for my work ethic. Like that was really what had gotten me there. It wasn't, natural talent as much as just being the one who was working the hardest. And, I
Right.
thought it's really a defining time to say you could go work incredibly hard at this, or you could challenge yourself to really find what else is out there. And so it was probably one of the hardest conversations to have with my golf pro, because he had worked with me for so long and had, really given me like free lessons for so long, and had given so much free time with this dream of turning pro. And it was such a hard conversation, because his thought was, you only did it a year. Like, how do you know? And I'm like, I just know. Like, I just have this feeling that this is not what I want to do. And so, so then I went on and actually decided to go back to school for accounting. And one of the best, pieces of advice or conversations I had is I really wasn't sure what to do, course wise or anything like that. And one of my professors in school had kind of pulled me aside and was like, economics is great, which was my undergrad, like, business is great, but accounting is a skill. And her biggest thing was, it doesn't matter how you've done previously in courses or anything like that. Like, if you want to learn accounting, you can learn accounting, right? Like, it's math, it's adding and subtracting. If you want to learn it, you can learn it, but you're going to have to really work hard, because it's not easy, but it's not something that you can't do. And her thing was, on the other side, it's literally the universal language of business. So if you want to do anything in business, like, learning this skill will work to your advantage forever if you put in the time now. And it was such a great eye-opening comment, because I feel like in college, so many times, if it doesn't come easy right away, you just discount it as like, oh, this isn't what I'm meant to do. Like, oh, I'm not good at marketing because I didn't do well in my marketing course. And in reality, we can learn anything we want to learn. And to me, walking into those accounting courses, especially not being an accountant yet or having any idea what this was, I just kept hearing that over and over again in my head. Well, I can learn this. This is a skill. Like I just have to find a way to learn it. And that got me all the way, into working for a firm and passing a CPA exam, was just that mindset of, I can learn this. I just have to put in the time and work hard.
This just reminds me of the book Tipping Point, right? That if you put in those 10,000 hours, there's nothing we can't master and be phenomenal at, but it requires the one thing you did have, which was self-discipline, right? And a good work ethic and a focus of, okay, I may not be good now, but if I put in the study and the time and the effort, I'm going to become great at this. And I think this is something in the real world that we do a disservice to our children and others by saying, what is your passion? What do you love to do? That should be what your career should be. And I'm not negating that, because our whole show is about passion and purpose. But you bring this other side that says that you can learn any skills, and there's certain skills in the world that are universally needed. Accounting, financial literacy is one of those. It's going to help us no matter what, right?
Yeah, and I really think that, especially, I'm sure there's other professions too, but I really feel like in accounting, it's such a common thought that you don't understand or can't understand what's going on. And I think in some respects that's due to, the accounting world that tries to make it seem very hard and complex. And, obviously it is in times, but I think as a business owner, it's such a big lesson that I try to pass on to all of our clients, that, like, yes, I enjoy working with you and I hope that you hire me as your bookkeeper or CPA, but you need to know these numbers. You need to understand these numbers as much as I do, in order for you to be successful, right? It can't be something that you just pass on and have me do your return and then you get it back and it's like, okay, well, you tell me. Like, no, it can't be. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons of COVID, was just that people had to know what was really going on in their business every day, and people couldn't wait for the CPA or the bookkeeper or whoever else you're paying to do it. Like, you as the owner had to know. And I hope that that's a lesson that stays with business owners, not as something to be afraid of, but as almost something empowering, right? Because if you know exactly where you are in your business, it's freeing and it takes away some of that fear that I think a lot of business owners have.
And during COVID, there are a lot of businesses that, were forced to close up shop. And then other business owners that did pretty well, or at least kept their doors open. What do you think is the difference between those two scenarios?
Yeah, so I think if you had asked me at the beginning of COVID, I would have said, location or where they are, or, some sort of, business model thing. But I really think so much of it is mindset, that I think, first of all, I think anyone who had a business during COVID should, take a second and pat themselves on the back, because what they were thrown during that, 2 to 3 year period was, a lifetime of challenges all bundled together. I was talking to someone yesterday and he's like, it was like dog years, right? So it was really like 21 years worth of challenges in that 3 year period. And especially for those in hospitality, because it just kept coming between labor shortages and then inflation. Like, it just was a crazy 3 years. But I really think so much of it came down to being able to take a step back and see your vision, right? See what your why. Like, if you opened a brewery in, Pennsylvania, like, that brewery's still there, right? It's not great right now because no one can come in your restaurant and sit down if it's 2020, or you have no staff, or, there's all these crazy things. But at the core, there's a reason you opened the brewery, right? And if that reason is there and you love your brewery, then we have to find a path forward. And I think the other challenging thing, which is where I do think it's so much mindset, is being able to see that that brewery that exists in 2023 or 2024 may be slightly different from what your vision was, right? There may have been aspects of your vision that changed during COVID because customer experience changed, customer expectations changed. And if you were able to adapt to your changing customer and said, at the end of the day, I want people to love my brewery. So if my customers want something different, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to find a way to fit in that mold. You were able to adapt. I think some people kind of out of fear drew like a line in the sand. I'm never going to use a delivery service because they take a share of the profit. It's like, well, your customer loves your delivery service. Go ask your staff, because I guarantee they have that app on their phone, right? Like, we have to adapt to what the next generation wants. And I think if you were able to be flexible and find a way to fit your vision into a different reality than what you thought in 2019, then you could have two people in the same situation, and one was just able to move on, and one was, really struggled.
I love this topic around mindset. We call it emotional and social intelligence in my business, and in the profiling business. And this marker called adaptability, if you didn't have it in spades through COVID and all those times, you suffered. If not financially, you suffered psychologically, because you were being pushed to change whether you liked it or not. But then you also brought in this other element of optimism, right? Where you can still see a future, but Muhammad has to go around the mountain, over the mountain, through the mountain, whatever.
Right.
He's got to, she's got to, whether running a brewery or any other kind of business, have to do business differently. But human nature, Tracy and I and another friend of ours were having this conversation just 2 days ago, I think. Naturally, when we're in stress, when we're in a crisis situation, we tend to go back to the old way of doing things. We tend to resort to old habits and out of fear, right? And it's the very time, and COVID taught us that we can't do it that way anymore. It forces us to innovate and do things differently. But our human nature is to hold tight and to batten down the hatches, right? Rather than think outside the box. So talk a little bit more about this mindset. When you were coaching, especially your hospitality companies, how did you get them to shift their mind? Or were there things that you could see, this company's not going to make it because they're unwilling or unable to shift their mindset? What did you do to kind of help them along the way, besides just, hello, wake up?
Right. No, I think the first thing in our world is getting rid of the fear, right? So the first thing that we have to get past is, how do we make it something that you're able to look at objectively, and something that you're not having the voice in your head say, I can't do this, I can't do this, I don't understand, I don't understand. So I think, a lot of times, and that's what I even try to tell my staff, is a lot of times if there is someone who's stressed or, angry, which happens in accounting because it's not always fun to be an accountant, a lot of times it's fear, right? They're not really mad at you. They're either mad at the situation, or they're mad and frustrated because they don't understand. So the first thing that we had to do, especially during that time, was force people to find a way to look at reality without getting fearful and without getting frustrated. So what we found right away was a month just was too long to wait, right? Like if I'm going to ask you, and people would at first, it was like, oh, well, let's build a budget for the rest of the year. And they're like, really? Like the entire world is shut down and I have no restaurant. So I'm not going to build a budget right now. And you're like, I understand where you're coming from, right? But okay, so maybe we don't want to set sales targets for May 2020, but could we do next week, right? Could we take 7 days and look at what do we think revenue looks like for 7 days? And at least that could get them thinking about being adaptive, right? Because fundamentally, I mean, you were talking about, my revenue's down 70%, it's down 80%. I have literally 20% of the sales I had 4 weeks ago, right? And I had to lay off my entire staff. I can't make rent. Like, I mean, crazy situation. So you're like, all right, well, if that's the case, let's take 1 week. And what does that look like? What do we need to bring in to at least cover some of these other expenses or put, expenses in line to know what we're going to pay. People don't realize now or forget that, I mean, it was 5 or 6 weeks before the first government intervention got into the hands of these hospitality people, especially, right? And so, and this is an industry where it's like you're living on those credit card deposits to pay your payroll, like it's in and out. I mean, most hospitality, have 2 to 4 weeks worth of cash reserves, maybe. And so if you're looking at a 5 to 6 week period, I mean, this was a crazy time where revenue literally went to zero. And so what we found was taking it weekly and then having little things we could track. So we tracked 1 week. What does week 2 look like? What does week 3 look like? Do we see it going up $500, right? Just to keep it where there was hope at the end and a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I had one client who owned a very large operation. I mean, completely shut down during his busiest time because they were seasonally always busy in March and April. And this was, just devastating. And his whole thing was, if I can get to my revenue, get to 70% of my prior year, like as a target, like we were at 40, if we could get to 70 by the end of the year, then we know we did a phenomenal job of coming back. And he did, and he tracked it every week. All right, we're at 68%, we're at 70, like here we go. And then, but just being okay with that, right? Because it was so hard to even be okay and not be mad that I'm mad that I'm down 30%, right? And instead of seeing it as like, I'm so happy that I got to 70% of last year's sales. Like, I mean, it was just a crazy reality. But I think if you could find a way to look at things weekly, at least you had a much more manageable thing to look at versus stepping back and looking at the whole year, which was just gut-wrenching and painful.
Wow. Wow. And I think Rebecca mentioned a little bit earlier before we started taping, and I thought it was very insightful that like you can confirm your decision making, right? And you can course correct when you're looking at your numbers weekly. And then also, I would think that it keeps the momentum going as well. Can you speak a little to that, like trusting your decision making and course correcting?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think, as a business owner, especially someone who's, maybe entering the world of business ownership for the first time and something that's different from what they've done in the past. I mean, I think you have to find a way to hold yourself in check in this new role, right? So you're the owner of this business, but also find a way to just make it where it's not overwhelming. And what we found during COVID was, we're still doing weekly accounting. We would never go back to monthly because for a business owner, the idea of having weekly accountability is more than just looking at your P&L. It's really accountability to what everyone on your team needs to do so we can really evaluate every week and course correct and make minor changes so it doesn't become a major change, at the end of the month, at the end of the year. And so much of it is down to, not being afraid. If my sales are down last week, that's okay. But, there's so much data now, whether it's, point of sale systems or, what a software you're using, being curious, right? Like not being mad that your sales are down from last week, but what can we figure out about that? Is there something that happened on the calendar, a holiday? Maybe there's just a slight difference in customers, but I guarantee even on a down week of sales, there's something good that happened there, right? There's an item someone bought more of than the week before. And just taking that time, 10 minutes to dig in, you now can have a much clearer picture of the people walking in your door. And same on your, cost side, because not every week is the same, whether you're ordering product or, different software subscriptions, whatever it is on the cost side, looking at 1 week of data can really help you feel like, oh, you know what, I can go fix that. I can save, $50 or whatever it is. And without even realizing it, you can have, a substantial change to what your month would have been by having 4 opportunities to look at last week. And so that's really what I think weekly accountability is, and not something that the owner has to have a burden of, but really something that the team should share. So if you have a manager, what are the things your manager needs to do and look at last week's performance on, whether it's labor or purchasing or whatever it is, but not really feeling like there's a wall between the owner and the employees, but rather it's a team effort and we're going to really work together to get the best result.
Yeah.
You're so right. Today we have so much data, right? That if we know how to analyze it, whether that's how many people we have to talk to before there's a deal, or cost of goods, or, marketing this or marketing that. It's interesting. I was thinking as you were talking, in my own business, last year we made some changes with some marketing. We spent a lot of money on something, and I looked at the numbers in third quarter. I should have looked at it this first quarter, second quarter. I should have been looking at it weekly. It took me 3 quarters before I looked at it and saw that it generated precisely zero.
Oh, no.
And it was a high cost. Not only did it generate zero, but it took us away from the thing that was making us money. And it's the first time in my business in 10 years, I had a quarter that was down. And had I been looking earlier, I could have course corrected earlier. And waiting that particular time cost me. But looking at it also allowed me to face that thing didn't work. It was a cool piece of technology that someone talked me into that didn't work for our business. Maybe it worked for someone else's, but it didn't work for us. So I had to shift not only where my money was going, but also how my team was working back to what was originally work. So those numbers and that data is so important. I want to shift gears just a little bit, and our audience loves franchising. What are your thoughts about building wealth through franchising, or building a business through franchising? I know you work with a lot of franchisees and franchisors. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I love the idea of franchising. I really think I'm an advocate for, both people who have a concept that they want to eventually franchise, as well as people who are purchasing a franchise for the first time. I think the thing that's great about a franchise, and what I've seen from working with both, independents or people that have their own business and then a franchise concept, is most of it's already figured out for you. So what you're really buying in a franchise model is you're buying time, right? You don't have to go figure out what your menu cost should be, because you have a team of experts who have figured that out for you, especially if it's hospitality franchise as an example. But, so what you're buying into is someone has a proven model that usually does beat the independents, especially in hospitality, on those margins. So, that's a great starting point. I think as a franchisee, sometimes there's a little bit, misunderstanding, or the money that it costs, because you do have fees and everything. But if you really think of it as you're buying years of time, right? It would have taken you 3, 4, 5 years to come up with the proven concept, make sure it has a following, like make sure it works, bottom line works. So, if you go into it with an appreciation for the agreement on both sides, I think that's a really good starting point. I think the other great thing of a franchise is that you do have resources. I mean, the franchisees that I've worked with that have been successful have made friends with other franchisee owners, right? Like they talk to each other all the time, they communicate, they build great relationships, because it isn't just something that the franchisor is in control of, right? This still is your business. And the more you can learn from other franchisees, people who've done it before, who've owned longer, you really can really figure out what works for you. I think the benefit of franchise ownership is that the fact that you have, a customer that understands what you're trying to do, and a business model that works. And I think it can be a great springboard to a new career, a new life. But, really, I think is still having that mindset of this is yours, right? Like this is still your location, whatever it is, your business, and really figuring out what do you want out of this? Because I think that's really the biggest question in any business ownership is this something that you want to own for 5 years? Is this something you want to own for 10 years? Is this a legacy that you're buying that you want to build up for your kids? I want to have 3 or 4, like whatever it is. I think, really having that intention behind what you're doing, because no matter what business you own, whether it's a franchise or independent, it's going to have stress, right? You're still a business owner. So, that's a good reality too, to know. But at the end of the day, I mean, the ones that I've seen it work for love it, right? They love their franchise, they love their product or service, and they love the new life of being a business owner.
Yeah.
And listening to you talk, you're so bubbly. Tell us about Anne the brand and the Largo Group brand. You have a podcast, you have 2 books out, you're running a business. I just want to hear about how you have this all like laid out and structured and what the podcast is about and what the books are about.
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, I love what I do. I love the idea of being able to talk every day to business owners all over the country and learn their story. I've always just really been curious about the journey of an entrepreneur, whether it's someone who's bought a franchise or someone who started something on their own. I've really found that to be, my passion. Accounting is the language of business, so accounting is part of it. But beyond just the numbers, I love looking at what they want it to be, right? Like this is what it is, and your P&L or your balance sheet is where you are today. But what do you see that isn't in the numbers? And that's really what I'm passionate about. So, a lot of our journey through COVID was really validating that. I used to be embarrassed by the fact people would say, "Oh, you're not a typical CPA," and you'd be like, "Oh, okay, like I'll be more like a CPA." Like, I'm sorry. But then in COVID, you realized that that's a benefit, right? Because if we were like every other CPA, we wouldn't be looking, for another 12 months at your books. So it's okay that we're different, and owning what we see as working better with business owners, and really driving that forward to new ways we can engage with them. Because I think, it's still a challenging time for business owners. It always will be, right? There's always going to be something that's challenging. But I think especially the last 3 years, really, I think this year is about finding that new reality, whether you're in a franchise or independent, finding, okay, we're through COVID, it's less reactive than it was during those years. So kind of a reset for where do we want to go, right? And I think that's exciting to be able to, we're building budgets for 2023 with our clients right now and really trying to get people to look ahead and look forward. So to me, that's what I love to do. And I've found that it's really important that people hear our voice. Pre-COVID, I was always kind of like, well, I'm an accountant. Do they really want to talk to me? It's not that exciting. But you realize in COVID that they need to hear your voice, because there's a lot of, and this is not putting CPAs down, but there's a lot of CPAs who don't get the struggle that business owners face. And there's a lot of business owners out there who feel like they're going it alone. And I feel like if we can be that voice, that resource that tells them, at the end of the day, this is your business. One of the things I hated hearing during COVID was all of the, talking heads who would just say, "Oh, close, just let it go. It's not worth your time," or, close your business, walk away. And you're like, how can you possibly say that? This is someone's dream. This is their passion. They have a vision. And yes, they've been hit with 21 years of horrible things, but we can get through this if we work together. And so to me, having that voice out there that says it's okay to have a vision, it's okay to have a dream that's more than what you see or have today, but let's find a way to get you there and not set limits on our own future.
It's interesting. Offline, you were saying something about you consider yourself risk averse. And most accountants are, by the way. But what I'm hearing in your passion, and that's what Tracy's picking up with, this excitement, this bubbliness that you have, is everything you're doing, especially in this weekly process, is you're helping folks with the passion, with the dream, with the business, avoid certain things. You're helping them avoid risk and loss and pain and suffering and poor decisions. So this part of you that yourself is a little risk averse has now found all these ways to help others avoid unnecessary risk. Sometimes there's just risk, right? That's just life. But by paying attention to our business on a weekly basis, having someone like the Largo Group giving us feedback on a regular basis allows us to not have some of those pitfalls down the future. So that's what I'm hearing. I don't know if you've even recognized that, but I wanted to applaud you. And that I think you've taken this part of you, this risk averse part, and you've turned it into an incredible business.
Oh, no, yes. And I think there's such a need, right? I think it's I really look at the business owners that are successful, the ones that are able to do this for a long time, have really, like I said, found a way to come to grips with this side of their business. And I think that, some of it goes back to, like I said, in the world of public accounting, there's just it's a disconnect in expectation. So I think as business owners, unfortunately in school, you're not taught to be an entrepreneur. You're not taught really what it's like to be a small business owner. I mean, you might learn about corporations, but it's completely different when it's you. And I think at the beginning, especially for so many of your clients that are going out on their own for the first time, being a franchise owner for the first time. I mean, you're going to wear 10 hats, right? You're going to be the HR person, and you're going to be the salesperson, and you're going to be the CFO and the CEO. And that's so overwhelming. And yet it's probably one of the best things you could ever do for your life if you can get through the overwhelming part. So I think some of it is just, trying to bridge the gap to people where if they feel overwhelmed, like realizing that they're not alone. And that's where I think in franchising, at least you have other franchise owners, people who can draw upon their experiences, because how many people of the, crazy statistics of, 9 out of 10 business fail, how many of those just, it was too much, right? Like their business might have been okay, but it was just too overwhelming and they couldn't see past, the startup.
And they didn't have the optimism and the work ethic and the flexibility to do what's necessary. And they didn't have the support of people like yourself, and in the franchise world, of the franchisees and the franchisor. So we do need to wrap this conversation up. Before we do, however, I want to make sure that people know how to get hold of you. And so what's the best way for people to do that?
Yes, so check out our website, thelargogroup.com. If you subscribe to our email blast, you'll get free resources. We send out, emails several times a week. We also offer free courses throughout the year on different topics that we find, important, or on social media at the Largo Group.
And don't forget the books, guys.
Yes.
Great. Any final piece of advice you would give an entrepreneur, a business owner, a franchisee? Any advice that you want to leave people with, Anne?
Yeah, like I said, I think the biggest piece of advice, especially when looking at accounting, is just the understanding that you can make it work. You can learn this, you can make it something that you understand, and you don't need, an outside force or the CPA or bookkeeper. At the end of the day, you can understand all the aspects of your business finances. So
Amazing. Tracy, what are your thoughts? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I've been sitting here thinking about how, like, most people would get involved with their careers and then go learn a skill like golf. Whereas with you, Anne, it was the opposite, right? You mastered golf pretty much, did become a pro, and then you were like, okay, just put one foot in front of the other. I can learn this accounting. I can do this. And it's amazing because if we look at these incredible skills that are so vital to our businesses, and we look at them with the mindset that, oh, we're just learning another hobby. Like even that, imagine how much more how much more explosive it would be when we do learn the skill, when we do master the skill. I think it would be incredible. And I just appreciate the fact that you opened my eyes to looking at it that way.
No, it's so true, especially accounting. So go online, order an accounting book, like force yourself to read like 3 pages a day,
Right.
and just know you can do it.
101, right? Yeah.
Amazing. It's amazing. You have changed my mindset also in terms of we're able to learn anything, and in terms of looking at my financials on a weekly basis. That's a big deal. So thank you again, Anne, for joining us today. And
did we say the name of the books? Did we say the name of the books?
Yes.
Never Again and Shotmaker?
Yes, it's Never Again, an entrepreneur's guide to creating a resilient business during the COVID pandemic recovery. And her recent book is Shotmaker, an owner's guide to creating a winning business.
Get the books.
Get the book, get your courses. All right. And those of you listening in today to the Franchise Woman podcast, thank you. We'll see you next week on another episode.